When we arrived at Margaret's single-story house, she was in the yard pulling weeds. Unable to contain himself, Andrew leapt out of the car and ran straight toward her, shouting loudly,
Grandma.
Whether it was a heartwarming reunion or a first meeting, Andrew had finally fulfilled his long-held wish.
Oh, Andrew, you made it, and you too as well. Thank you for making the long trip.
Margaret took off her dirt-stained gardening gloves and gave Andrew a big hug. Her expression was the softest and warmest I had ever seen.
It's been a while.
It's so good to see you again, Margaret. It had been 7 years since our last visit, and I couldn't help but feel a little happy too. Even though there wasn't anything in particular I wanted to talk about, the topics just kept flowing.
Grandma, what were you doing?
I was tidying up the yard. I wanted it to look nice before you all arrived.
Thanks to her effort, or perhaps her regular care, the yard was beautifully maintained, exuding a sense of calm that seemed to reflect Margaret's personality. A small flower bed held several blooming flowers, adding to the charm.
Well then, now that Andrew is here, why don't I prepare some drinks? Come on, let's head inside.
Saying this, she took Andrew's hand. It was truly a heartwarming moment.
Mom, about that thing we talked about.
At this point, Stephen brought up something with an ominous tone.
Fine.
As I wondered what the conversation was about, I noticed something unusual about Andrew sitting next to me. The wide smile he had just moments ago had vanished, and his face was now pale as a sheet. What's wrong? Then Andrew said something completely unexpected.
We need to call the police. Grandma is.
I'm Jennifer, living with my husband, Stephen, and our son, Andrew.
Hello, is this Jennifer?
It was a call from Margaret, Stephen's mother, who lives far away. Margaret and I have a great relationship, so I always welcome her calls, whether they're for a casual chat or anything else. Hello, Margaret. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How's everyone doing?
By everyone, she means me, Stephen, and our son, Andrew. Andrew is currently in first grade, so he's at school at this time and can't come to the phone. But he's growing up healthy. As for me and Stephen, there isn't much to report these days. Back in the day, Stephen often had problems with women's relationships. Basically stalkers, which caused us a lot of trouble. But we've overcome those challenges and are now living peacefully. We're doing well, thank you.
That's good to hear. By the way, is Andrew around?
Unfortunately, he's at school.
I see. It's the middle of a weekday after all.
The last time Margaret and Andrew saw each other in person was 7 years ago. In other words, they met right after he was born and haven't been face-to-face since. The last memory Margaret has of Andrew is as a newborn, and Andrew doesn't even remember meeting her. There are several reasons, but the main one is the physical distance. From our home to Margaret's house, we need to take a plane. Right after Andrew was born, Stephen was very busy with work, and we couldn't visit often. To make things worse, the past few years were dominated by a pandemic, making it difficult to travel, and we completely missed the right timing. Now that things are starting to calm down, Stephen and I have been discussing visiting this Christmas. By the way, about this Christmas.
Do you think you can come?
Yes, that's what we're planning.
I'll finally get to see Andrew. I'm really looking forward to it.
Hey, Margaret called today. That night, I shared the news with Stephen and Andrew, including, of course, our plans to visit.
It's been 7 years already. Time flies.
I get to see Grandma?
Andrew was a grandma's boy. It's funny, considering he's barely met her, but he's always been fond of her. Margaret is gentle and kind, and that comes across even through phone calls or video chats. Sadly, Andrew's grandfather passed away before he was born, so he never got to see Andrew. At the time, we had suggested that Margaret move in with us, but she politely declined, saying she felt more comfortable living on her own and didn't want to intrude on our time as a couple. That didn't change after Andrew was born. Now, with the chance to meet her, Andrew was absolutely thrilled.
I'll make sure to get time off in advance this year.
Yes, please do. At that moment, I suddenly noticed something. Andrew was staring intently at nothing. There he goes again. For some reason, Andrew seems to be able to see things that shouldn't be visible. It's what people often call a sixth sense. At first, neither Stephen nor I took it seriously, thinking it was just the kind of story kids his age make up. But it didn't seem like he was lying, and we've recently come to accept it. Andrew's reactions vary depending on the situation. This time, he seemed quite calm, but when he sees something terrifying, he sometimes cries uncontrollably or becomes so scared he can't move. Whatever he was seeing now didn't seem particularly frightening. He just stared into the void as if he were listening to something. Andrew. When I called his name, he turned to me as if nothing had happened.
I'm okay.
Stephen and I didn't know how to respond to those words. From then on, Andrew began frequently staring at the same spot in the house without saying a word, only to quietly leave after a while. It started to unsettle me, so I brought it up with Stephen.
Well, he's not crying like he usually does, right?
That's true. But when he stands in the same spot for days on end, it does make you think a little.
Even so, I don't know what we can do about it. Do you think anything would change if we talked to him?
It's better than doing nothing. He might be going through something difficult.
You've got a point. I'll talk to him before we head to Mom's.
Okay, thanks. Stephen did try talking to him, but all Andrew kept saying was, I'm okay. We had no idea what he meant by that, and time just kept passing without any answers. And then, Christmas arrived. From boarding the plane to meeting Margaret, everything was a first-time experience for Andrew. As soon as he sat in his seat on the plane, Andrew's eyes sparkled with excitement as he eagerly waited for takeoff. Eventually, the pilot's announcement came on, and the moment finally arrived. When Andrew felt his body getting heavier and then lifting into the air, he was absolutely overjoyed.
Are we flying?
The way he asked me with quiet excitement was so endearing. Yes, look out the window. Watching the plane gradually lift off the runway, Andrew cheered with even more excitement. After about an hour and a half, we safely arrived at our destination airport, and from there, we drove for another 30 minutes before finally reaching Margaret's house. Even in the car, Andrew's excitement didn't wane. I was worried he might tire himself out before we arrived, but that concern turned out to be unnecessary. When we arrived at Margaret's single-story house, she was in the yard pulling weeds. Unable to contain himself, Andrew leapt out of the car and ran straight toward her, shouting loudly.
Grandma.
Whether it was a heartwarming reunion or a first meeting, Andrew had finally fulfilled his long-held wish.
Oh, Andrew, you made it. And you too as well. Thank you for making the long trip.
Margaret took off her dirt-stained gardening gloves and gave Andrew a big hug. Her expression was the softest and warmest I had ever seen.
It's been a while.
It's so good to see you again, Margaret. It had been 7 years since our last visit, and I couldn't help but feel a little happy too. Even though there wasn't anything in particular I wanted to talk about, the topics just kept flowing.
Grandma, what were you doing?
I was tidying up the yard. I wanted it to look nice before you all arrived.
Thanks to her effort, or perhaps her regular care. The yard was beautifully maintained, exuding a sense of calm that seemed to reflect Margaret's personality. A small flower bed held several blooming flowers, adding to the charm.
Well then, now that Andrew is here, why don't I prepare some drinks? Come on, let's head inside.
Saying this, she took Andrew's hand. It was truly a heartwarming moment.
Mom, about that thing we talked about.
At this point, Stephen brought up something with an ominous tone.
Save it for later. You've just arrived.
Margaret, perhaps sensing the unease, firmly cut him off at that point. However, I had no idea what they were talking about. What's the thing?
She just said to wait. I'll explain it properly later, so hang tight.
All right. Feeling slightly left out, I held back my curiosity, thinking it wouldn't be appropriate to discuss unpleasant topics right now. The inside of the house hadn't changed at all since 7 years ago. From the furniture arrangement to the overall atmosphere, everything was exactly the same, making me feel as if I had come back to my own childhood home.
Come on, have a seat anywhere. I'll get some drinks.
Let me help you.
Oh, really? Well, in that case, I'd love your help.
Even the kitchen cupboards hadn't changed. I found the instant coffee and tea bags and took them out. Stephen prefers coffee, Margaret enjoys tea, and Andrew loves milk tea, so I prepared each accordingly.
You remembered.
Of course. After a while, Stephen brought up that topic again.
Is it all right to talk about it now?
Fine.
This time, Margaret gave in, and the two of them left the room together and headed upstairs. As I sipped from my cup, wondering what the conversation upstairs was about, I noticed something strange about Andrew sitting beside me. The wide smile he had just moments ago had vanished, and his face was now pale as a sheet. What's wrong? Then Andrew said something completely unexpected.
We need to call the police. Grandma is.
Call the police. What is Andrew talking about? We were just having a normal conversation moments ago, so why suddenly bring up the police? Unable to ignore the questions swirling in my mind, I asked Andrew to clarify. What do you mean by the police?
It's dangerous. Grandma is.
But he wouldn't say anymore. I felt as though I had experienced something similar to this situation before. I pushed my sluggish brain to its limits and finally remembered. Andrew doesn't give detailed answers when he sees something. If that's the case, then maybe Andrew saw something. Something terrifying. While I was lost in thought, Andrew's condition rapidly worsened, and he began trembling uncontrollably with fear. As Andrew's extraordinary trembling filled me with unease, the doorbell suddenly rang. I hesitated for a moment, unsure whether I should answer, but eventually decided to. If it was just a delivery or a neighbor, it felt wrong to make them wait. And frankly, I couldn't bear the tension in the room any longer. When I opened the door, I wasn't met by a delivery person or a neighbor, but by a ghostly-looking woman radiating hostility. In her right hand, she was gripping a knife. My heart was seized with terror, and I couldn't even manage a single word. Who was this woman? Why was she here? What did she want? Though the answers had to exist, my brain was too overwhelmed to process anything. However, just before I fell into complete panic, a thought pierced through my fear. I have to protect Andrew. At that moment, a large figure dashed past outside, slamming into the woman. I instinctively knew I had to act immediately. As I turned to rush to Andrew, I saw Margaret holding him tightly, his voice frozen in fear. Feeling a brief sense of relief, I turned my gaze back to the front door, where I saw Stephen grappling with the woman from earlier. What's going on?
I'm sorry, Jennifer. I'll explain everything later. Mom, take Andrew somewhere safe.
Without a word, Margaret acted as if she had anticipated this and quickly took Andrew out through the back door.
Let go of me, Stephen.
My brain refused to process the chaos, leaving me unable to make sense of what was happening. Who is she? As I said those words, a terrible realization hit me. It wasn't just a hunch. It was more like an answer, albeit an unwelcome one. This woman was one of Stephen's stalkers, just like the many others who had followed him in the past. Although things had seemed calm in recent years, it turned out that trouble had been quietly brewing beneath the surface. The woman Stephen had restrained was Olivia, a younger childhood friend of his who had apparently harbored feelings for him since they were kids. Now, she sat quietly on a chair, disarmed and with her hands tied.
But unfortunately, from my perspective, she was nothing more than a little sister. I thought I had made that clear to her many times.
And then why did she show up today with a knife? I directed the question at Stephen, but it was Olivia who answered.
I knew Stephen had a woman and a child. They were in the way. If they were gone, Stephen would come back to me. Isn't that right?
As you can see, reasoning with her doesn't work. As for the timing, Mom said she had been hanging around this house a lot, so she must have figured it out.
What do you mean, hanging around the house?
Pretty much exactly that. She came by almost every day, helping Mom with things around the house and trying to act like she was my wife.
I never heard anything about this before.
Well, she didn't want to worry you unnecessarily. That's what I was trying to talk to Mom about earlier. I was hoping to deal with this before anything happened to you or Andrew, but she beat me to it.
What a mess this is. Stephen had dealt with many stalkers or near stalkers before, but this was the first time the situation had been so direct and dangerous. Although I hadn't mentioned it to him, I had already called the police, which gave me at least a small sense of relief. As we continued talking, Olivia muttered to herself in a low, incoherent voice, almost like a delirium.
What would happen to Margaret without me? Do you have any idea how much I've done for Stephen? How much I've done for Margaret? They can't do anything without me. This house, Stephen, they need me.
She didn't seem remotely sane. The thought that she might try something even more outrageous filled me with deeper fear. If there was anything positive in this situation, it was that she no longer had a weapon, and most importantly, that Andrew was safely away from all of this. I couldn't help but be grateful for Margaret's quick thinking. After a while, Olivia began to calm down and was able to hold a somewhat normal conversation. Although she kept apologizing over and over, it was still a marked improvement compared to her earlier hysteria.
Why did you try something like this? This is a crime.
I'm sorry, but I just wanted Stephen to understand how much I need him.
I've told you many times, put yourself in my shoes. It hurts to reject you again and again.
I couldn't bring myself to intervene in their conversation. To be precise, perhaps I didn't even want to intervene. In any case, as long as I still felt this overwhelming fear, no one would willingly get involved in such a situation. In any case, there was nothing I could do but wait for the police to arrive. Then, as if the tension had finally subsided, Olivia suddenly said she was thirsty. Stephen and I exchanged glances. There was an unspoken conversation between us. Should we give her something to drink? Should we untie her hands? Was her request genuine? After silently debating the options, Stephen reluctantly handed her a glass of water. He even untied her hands so she could drink properly. That turned out to be a mistake.
Don't move.
She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward her with forceful power. In her hand was yet another blade. It seemed Olivia had hidden a box cutter in one of her pockets.
Olivia, stop this right now.
I'm not joking. I'm completely serious. Everything will work out if she's gone.
I was taken hostage in the classic scene you'd expect from a crime drama. The trembling blade pressed against my neck. Strangely, I remained unusually calm. So her claim about being thirsty was a lie. How can I turn this situation around? My thoughts were remarkably clear, even though I couldn't explain why.
Think it through, Olivia. Calm down.
I am calm.
Olivia didn't listen to Stephen's plea at all. I couldn't see her expression from where I was, but judging from her tone, I could imagine her face was cold and emotionless. Even so, I remained calm. The reason for that would soon become clear. The sound of knocking on the front sliding door gradually grew louder, echoing into the living room.
This is the police. Is everything all right?
Somewhere in the back of my mind, I had already anticipated this moment. After all, I was the one who had called them. Apparently, Olivia could no longer stay composed. She dropped the box cutter she was holding and tried to flee, but Stephen didn't miss the opportunity. He quickly restrained her, pinning her down, and she was once again tied up. After Olivia was taken away by the police, Andrew and Margaret returned a little while later. Andrew, are you okay?
Yeah, Grandma took me to her friend's house, so I was fine.
I'm so glad. Thank you, Margaret.
It's all right. But are you okay?
There was a lot going on, but we managed to stay safe.
I was so worried.
Looking at Andrew's face, I remembered how he had trembled and said, "We need to call the police," as soon as we arrived at this house. Could it be? Did Andrew foresee this happening? By the way, Andrew, when we first got here, you said we needed to call the police. What did you mean by that? Andrew hesitated for a moment, looking a little confused, but then began to speak slowly.
I saw something bad. Something black and scary. I thought Grandma's house was in danger, so I said we should call.
So that's what it was. Then he added something that left me stunned.
Grandpa told me, too.
Grandpa? Of course, Andrew knows of his grandfather's existence, but he never met him. So what does he mean by, "he told me"? Both Stephen and I were visibly confused, but Margaret nodded as if she had come to a quiet understanding.
Can Andrew see them too?
Yeah. Can't everyone else see them?
No, neither I, Stephen, nor Jennifer can. Andrew, you're special.
What do you mean?
My husband could see them too. You know, those spirits. He used to talk about them a lot.
Apparently, Stephen's father had a sixth sense, and that ability was passed down to Andrew through what seemed to be a form of genetic inheritance.
There are different kinds of sixth senses, and my husband seemed particularly good at talking about the future. Also, things that were going to happen. The most surprising thing for me was when he talked about Andrew. He mentioned him as if it were some kind of prophecy, even though Andrew wasn't even on the way yet. For example, he said we'd have a grandson. At the time, I had no way to confirm it, but looking back now, I realize everything he said was true.
Is that so? Though I had heard stories about Stephen's father before, this was news to me.
I never mentioned it because I knew no one would believe me.
And she was probably right. Back then, I doubt I would have. But now, it was different. I was certain that Andrew had inherited this ability.
Now that I think about it, Olivia only started coming around after he passed away. If she'd had any guilt about what she was doing, she probably wouldn't have come near the house while he was alive.
That made sense. She must have been afraid of her actions being seen through. While it was just speculation, it seemed to fit the situation without contradiction.
Grandpa came to our house. He kept saying, "Be careful."
So that's what it was. When Andrew was staring into the void at home, it must have been because of that. and that's why he kept saying, "I'm okay." I was deeply impressed by their extraordinary abilities. But more than that, I couldn't help but feel immense relief that we had made it through this crisis unscathed.
All right, let's make some proper drinks this time. Andrew, would you like to help me?
Sure, I'd love to.
Now, in the very same living room where all the chaos had unfolded just moments ago, a calm atmosphere had returned. Though I wasn't fully accustomed to this sudden shift, I was still able to feel at ease. Perhaps, in part, thanks to this cup of tea.
Hey, Mom, I've been thinking about something.
What is it?
Stephen suddenly brought up a topic. I felt a sense of déjà vu and unconsciously braced myself.
Would you reconsider moving in with us?
My caution turned out to be unnecessary. If it was about that, there was no reason to be on edge.
Well,
Given everything that had happened, I could understand how Stephen felt, and I even shared his opinion. So, I decided to offer a little support. It would be reassuring for everyone, both for us and for you, Margaret. There was no guarantee that Olivia wouldn't lose control again and come after us. We didn't know how long the law would keep her restrained, but living together was a sure way to protect ourselves. And I was sure Andrew would be thrilled to live with his beloved grandmother. Andrew would be really happy too. In a way, that was the final nudge.
well, if it would ease everyone's worries, I suppose I'll take you up on that offer.
By the way, Olivia's case is being treated as a criminal matter.
I see. Stephen, having heard it somewhere, told us about it as soon as he got home. It wasn't that I was indifferent, but I couldn't think of anything else to say. As long as we never saw her again, that would be enough. Some time had passed since that incident.
Welcome home, Dad.
Welcome back.
I'm home.
Our lives had become peaceful and happy. Margaret and I, who already had a good relationship, became even closer. And now we've found a shared hobby that we enjoy together. However, even I can't compete with Andrew. Whenever he's home, Margaret is completely devoted to him, spending all her time taking care of him. At first, I worried whether it might be a burden for her. But watching the two of them together, those concerns gradually faded away. Andrew was always smiling when he was with Margaret, and his joy was so infectious that it made me smile too. Stephen and I often watched their interactions and felt deeply relieved that we had made the right decision, a choice that brought happiness to all four of us. Our family will continue to live happily together, supporting one another when needed.